to the Innovation Theater. Glad to have you here. So I'm super excited to be introducing this next session. We're going to be hearing from the founder and CEO of Qeyno Labs, and he's going to be talking to us today about how his program and his business is building the next generation of developers and innovators for our future, leveraging the values of innovation, play, and all that good stuff. So I want to welcome to the floor the White House champion of coolness, awesomeness, Kalimah Priforce. Come on up.
That's on us. You could be a genius kid sitting in a desk in Oakland, California. You're 43 minutes away from the Google campus, the Apple campus, and the Facebook campus, but it may as well be on the other side of the moon.
Silicon Valley may be the cradle of technology, but up-and-coming high-tech entrepreneurs are ditching the high rents of the South Bay in San Francisco for the urban vibe and starting to feel a local.
I think Silicon Valley wants Oakland to be an extension of Silicon Valley.
The first black male achievement hackathon happening right here in Oakland.
It's a curfew for being able to alter the parameters of something.
The genius in Northern California ain't all that Silicon Valley.
Change the parameters of how people see you. Change the parameters of how you see yourself.
I learned a lot. I met a lot of new people. I've become a better leader.
This is like a good step for us to help turn it around into the future that we want it to be like.
It should not be a privilege to learn how to code.
You're beautiful. You're gorgeous. You're brilliant. You're fantastic.
I never thought that I would be making apps or learning how to code.
I didn't meet anybody in this group. I was like, I want to be somebody.
Oakland is showing the world how technology can be inclusive.
Hello everyone, my name is Qeyno Priforce and I am the co-founder of Qeyno Labs. And the video that you just saw is a trailer from a documentary that's being produced. But I know you've been hearing diversity and inclusion for the past couple of days, so I decided to talk about one of my favorite hobbies, which is the bonding of polypeptides. No, actually it's about these kids. So, one of the things that draw you to this presentation, some of you who don't know of me and the work we do, is that word mentoring. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, but we're in a good time right now. I call it the golden age of heroes. A social justice league. Black Girls Code, Blue 1647, Code 2040, Yes We Code, and the list goes on and on, Hack the Hood, and several others around the country. We're forming together. We're working with each other for the first time. And why? So, this word hacking, which is about exploring the limits of what's possible, and hackathon. Now imagine a Baptist preacher in the South coming to the pulpit and using the word hackathon. Now that may sound a little wonky, but not too long ago, that Baptist preacher introduced the word boycott. And so to introduce a new vocabulary, we have to also introduce new experiences to what makes us hackers. And so for me, that started in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I grew up in a group home in Bed-Stuy. And when I was around 8 years old, I read a lot of books, all of the books. And when we ran out of books, I decided to have a hunger strike against my group home. And so for 3 days, I had nothing to eat. I chose not to eat anything. And one day the director comes to the group home and he says, "Hey, how's it going?" Because I was doing my chores, and that really pissed off the staff that I was not eating, still doing my chores. And I said, "Well, I haven't eaten in 3 days." He called an emergency meeting, and I got my books. Not only did I get my books, but he gave me access to the library and to the museum, so I could actually leave the group home environment. I started my first computer company when I was 16. So that's when I became a techie. But the group home taught me to be a hacker. It taught me to hack my own isolation. Dr. Malcolm Gladwell, he says that poverty is not desperation or even deprivation. That poverty is isolation. And so what we're doing, what Qeyno is doing, what many of these organizations are doing, is that we're hacking their isolation. And they are hacking their own isolation. That's the first thing we teach them to hack. And we do that through a hackathon. Now, there are guiding principles as to what makes us do what we do, right? If you combine magic and science, you get alchemy. And so, some of the science is mentorship, entrepreneurship, and rapid prototyping. And this is really important. So we're teaching entrepreneurship, rapid prototyping to the kids. Mentorship falls in line with inclusion, empathy, and play, but specifically empathy. One of the things that's really important that makes us stand out is that it's not just about these developers from Google and Facebook who are working with these kids, getting into their experiences, but it's also about the transformative effect that these kids have on these professionals. So they go back to their offices, they go back to their workplaces, and they have a different narrative of what's happening in Oakland, what's happening in St. Louis, what's happening in Ferguson, in Brooklyn. So we call that empathy spillover. Some of our superstars, like Victoria Pinnell. Victoria and her mom couldn't afford to get a plane ticket to our hackathon in New Orleans. She went to the bank, the same day, went to the bank, and found out that they couldn't extend her credit. And so Victoria told us this to one of my team members, Kelly Nayo. And so we said, "Can you still make it?" And they said, "Yeah, we're driving down there." And so they drove from New York City to New Orleans just to be a part of this hackathon. Better yet, Victoria recorded her pitch because we had our hackathon started off with with pitches, with opening pitches. Many of you are familiar with hackathons, and so she recorded her pitch, and we showed her pitch at the hackathon. And so by the time she arrived, there was already a team helping her build an app that stops human trafficking. Probably next Edwin Greenfellow. And then you have Zachary Dorcheville. Zachary couldn't afford to attend our hackathon in New Orleans. And we go from place to place, and I'll talk more about that. We go from place to place with our hackathons. He couldn't afford it, and so I suggested to him, I said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the word crowdfunding?" He said no. And so I went over it with his mom. No, actually, it's his aunt, but she's like a mother, because Zachary's an orphan, just like me. And his aunt took him in, took his sister in. And so she went from raising 2 kids to 4 kids. They crowdfunded their way not only to the hackathon, not only to New Orleans, but from what I'm told, they got front row seats to see Prince perform at Essence Festival. Yeah, I gave up one of my tickets, so he got a really good ticket. So, and Brian will talk a little bit more about his experience at the hackathon. But so we've done 2 hackathons. We're doing 2 more before the end of the year. one for My Brother's Keeper, which hacks the My Brother's Keeper initiative that comes out of the White House. How are we hacking it? Because we're increasing the conversation, we're expanding the conversation to include what young women feel and think about improving the life outcomes of young men of color. So you may have a young lady who says, well, I think it will improve the life outcomes of young men of color if they stop catcalling me on the street. And I want to build an app that would help them not do that. And maybe it'll give them some pickup tips. And as well as those who identify as male. So trans youth are welcome to this hackathon experience that is My Brother's Keeper. And we're doing a hackathon for Ferguson. We're doing a hackathon for Ferguson, Missouri, where for the first time you'll have in a room police officers without their badges, without their guns, actually joining the team of these youth, of Ferguson youth. That's inclusion. That's empathy. That's mentorship. You know, so I'm from the hip-hop generation, and 1994 was a really big year, because that was when Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die came out. But it was also the year that Nas came out with Illmatic.
Yeah, 20
And many of you who are part of that generation know that Illmatic was such an incredible album. One of the lines that came out of that album was, "The world is yours. The world is yours." He was telling inner city youth that the world is yours. So we're the Illmatic of hackathons because just like Queens, you know, they had their rhyme. South Bronx had their rhyme. Brooklyn had their rhyme. I want St. Louis to challenge Oakland. I want Oakland to challenge San Francisco. I want Miami to challenge Oakland on who can produce the next generation of developers. See, this is great. This is nice. This is wonderful. But I want 100 of these around the country. And in order to do that, we have to change the thinking from a deficit to an asset-based thinking around our kids. They have assets. They have strengths. They have experiences that make us so much better, and we build so much better products. It was the Trayvon Martin tragedy, the George Zimmerman verdict, that pivoted Qeyno Labs from being a software startup to being a hackathon company. Don't get it wrong. The model of the 20th century was that charity is about the redemption of the giver and not about the liberation of the receiver. Tech inclusion and diversity is not charity. I'll say that again. Tech inclusion and diversity is not charity. It makes us competitive. It makes us so much more greater and prepared for a 21st century. It's not about Silicon Valley hacking the hood. It's about the hood hacking Silicon Valley. Thank you.
All right.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Brian Goodson. I'm a business solutions senior consultant here at Salesforce.com. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my experience at the Yes We Code hackathon in New Orleans. So I hadn't participated in a hackathon prior to this one at Essence Festival, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. However, it became obvious very quickly that it was going to be a unique experience, to say the least. So the first day, we're all in one big room, and all of the youth participants are up in the front, and they, one by one, give pitches for apps that they want to create that weekend. So after the pitches, the volunteers and mentors, and I was one of the mentors, we chose groups that we wanted to work with based on our skills and interests in the pitches. So the group that I chose was called LOYO, which stands for Learn on Your Own. We basically wanted to create a website that allowed people to pick a topic, such as coding in Java, and then you would get all the resources you needed to learn that particular skill on your own in your spare time. It was a great idea. So my team was awesome, but there was one guy on my team that stood out in particular. His name was Eud, who's one of the youth participants in the hackathon. So Eud, he's a Haitian immigrant. He came to the US about 4 years ago. And not only did he teach himself English using Rosetta Stone, he also taught himself HTML and CSS at the same time. A really smart kid. He actually reminds me a little bit of myself at that age. So like I said, the team was great. We were working around 12 hours a day during this hackathon, and we were drained, to say the least, but I mean, we still had that excitement at the end of the day, just as much as we had at the beginning of the day. So, you know, we were ready to take on the next day after that. So, day 2 of the hackathon, we needed a logo for Loyo. Okay, that's 10 times fast. So we needed a logo for Loyo. So we started to come up with a few ideas, but then we said, you know what, it would be really great if we went out and found some of the youth participants in the hackathon and helped, you know, allowed them to build this logo for us. So that's exactly what we did. And actually, if we could go back a few slides, I have a photo to go along with this part of the story. Okay, so like I said, we needed a logo, and the logo that we came up with, like I said, we came up with a few logos internally, and then we said, you know, let's get some of the youth to help us out. So we had a few submissions, but one that was submitted to us, we fell in love with immediately. I had a photo of it up here for you guys. But the young guy that came up with the sketch, he brought it to us, and we said, we love it. You know, this is great. This is what we're looking for. And Eud, he sees the sketch, and this is actually it right here. So this is Eud right here on the right, and the young man that drew the sketch over here on the left. So Eud, he sees the sketch, and he's like, I got this. This is great. I love it. So I didn't know what he meant by that, but he grabs the sketch, runs over to his laptop, and if you see, he recreates the sketch exactly on Photoshop. We're all blown away like, okay, you know HTML, CSS, and you're clearly very handy with Photoshop as well. I mean, these kids are amazing. So, you know, of course, I gathered them up and said, we got to take a picture of this. This is great. So, you know, I took this picture, and I have a huge smile on my face as I take the picture. And, you know, as I'm taking this picture, I realized that, you know, a lot of what we're doing here it's a lot bigger than a hackathon. You know, we're creating moments in these young people's lives that they're going to remember for years to come. No doubt about that. So, you know, at the end of the day, the hackathon, I would say, would be a major eye-opener for me. It really opened my eyes to some of the amazing things that could happen if you took potential and meet the opportunity with that. You know, I have to thank Kalimah for really driving this vision forward. I encourage everybody here to get involved with Qeyno Labs if you can. I mean, they're doing the right thing. They got it. So, yeah, Kalimah, I wish you know, the best success to the hackathons and everything else that you guys do in the future. And thank you guys for my time.
Fantastic. Was that awesome or what? Thank you, Kalimah. Thank you, Brian, for this wonderful presentation. I want to open it up for questions from the audience. I know you guys are excited, so go ahead. Don't be shy. Put your hand up. Who's first? Kalimah, what is next for you? What can we look for next?
Great question. So, after the success of the Applied Technology Hackathon, I had a anniversary board meeting that many of you were a part of, and it was very inclusive. I included families and hackathon participants, and they said, "Kalimah, you got to keep doing this. You got to keep doing this." And I said, "No. You know, I do software. You know, no. We're prototyping. No." And so, but they eventually convinced me. But the only way they could convince me is if we didn't diverge from still developing a product. There was no way you could get me into the nonprofit world. No way. I'm a social businessman. No, can't have no. But social impact but being able to sell a product. See, I can sell a product a whole lot better than I can sell a service. And so we've got 8 products sold next year. You've got Berkeley coming up. We've got we're already New Orleans and Essence, and several others. And I think that's the exciting part is not only with these 2 hackathons coming up, and please sign up, MBK Hack and UbuntuHack.com. But it's just really exciting that we can do that. We can do that kind of work.
Great question. Are there any other questions from folks in the audience? Come on up.
Hey, so I just want to say that I've known Kalimah since before the first hackathon, and it's been a real honor to watch someone of such heart and vision and deep compassion pioneer this great work, and I'm just so proud that I've known you since the beginning. My question would be, what do you want and need from all of your adoring fans in order to continue to do your great work in the world?
So who I sell the hackathons to are to major organizations, to companies. For example, the city of Berkeley, they've already put in their bid for a hackathon focused just on girls, with a specific focus on human trafficking. And so we'll be working with organizations focused on human trafficking, which means being able to offer room and board to many of the girl participants, and let them know that this will be a very safe space for you. And they're hacking, and at the same time, behind the scenes, we're looking at which organizations they can plug into so that they never find themselves on the streets again. And so, talk to your city, talk to your nonprofit organization, talk to your foundation about joining us, about getting involved and buying a hackathon. So yeah, and of course, if you're a developer, please sign up to be a mentor. Once again, mbkhack.com for My Brother's Keeper Hackathon in Philadelphia, November 14th through the 16th, and our one-day hackathon in Ferguson, Missouri, that's November 1st. And that's UbuntuHack.com. And the Ubuntu Hack is a theme inspired by Nelson Mandela and his work in South Africa, which is about hackathons between communities in conflict, like with the police officers and the youth of Ferguson. And so can you imagine Ubuntu hackathons in Gaza or in the Sudan? And so I believe that when you put people in the same room, and for long enough, and you give them problems to solve, they find the problems to solve, that miracles can happen. You create a space for miracles to happen. And they build something. And once you build something, many of you who are techies as well, once you build something with someone, you're connected to them for the rest of your life.
So I have a question for you, Kalimah. So let's say I've never worked with young people before, especially young people of color from underserved communities. Do I need some sort of training to be prepared to mentor, or what do you say about that?
So that's a good question. So rather than just sort of throw you guys in, we are providing diversity training prior to each hackathon. We're providing workshops in terms of how to sort of ask the right questions. And one thing that's really important is that we as adults, because we sometimes do that as grown-ups, is that we don't sort of push them in a particular direction. Kind of like how we do with APIs at hackathons. You know, we push them towards that API. Sometimes we do the same thing with certain problems. And so, for example, with Ferguson, Missouri, one of the things that we encourage is that that adults don't push the young people towards, let's say, dealing with police brutality. If that young person wants to deal with police brutality, they'll deal with that police brutality. But then actually the number one concern for Ferguson youth, it's not the police, it's homelessness. That the school districts of Ferguson and Florissant, as well as Normandy, that those are 2 school districts that are operating out of maybe 3 or 5 that are somewhere in the same area, and all the schools in the other areas, the schools are shut down. And so they're boarded up, but you know that something's happening because there are mattresses right outside of those schools. And that's the thing, is it's like all that CNN coverage, and notice how you don't see anything about the schools? And those mattresses are outside because they have bed bugs. So there are people sleeping in those schools. And that's one of the problems that they want to find. They want to solve. One of the young people spoke to me and said that, yeah, I want to build an app so that just in case something happens and I got to move, then I could just send my homework to my teacher. My teacher can send me the homework, and I don't have to worry about carrying stuff and so those are the kind of problems that young people want to solve. And so we help you to ask the right questions when it comes to getting these young people engaged with their ideas, their own ideas.
Will, another question? Sorry.
Brian, I had a question for you. You said that was your first hackathon, right? So from that experience going in, how were you changed from it coming back?
How am I changed? So I think that these hackathons that Qeyno Labs put on are a lot different than other hackathons you would normally find out in the world. But I would say from this particular hackathon, like I said, it really opened my eyes to really how powerful a hackathon could be. I literally saw eyes open up, and when they're creating these things and they work for the first time on the computer. It's really an emotional. It was actually at one point where Kalimah stopped the hackathon and we all circled up and kind of talked about, the young people talked about what they had learned, and it was a really emotional moment. I mean, people were crying, and it was like a really emotional moment because they're really connected to those type of experiences. So as far as what changed me, I think that, like I said, I would definitely want to get more involved in these things and really, dive deeper into these life changes that I'm seeing in these kind of hackathons.
Hey, can I just want to add on to something? So this is really important for those of you who are, you have the developers, you have the admins. So those of you who are admins, managers, think about introducing that kind of experience to your developers. Yeah, they can play tennis outside and they've got all this really great food all day long, but that's what makes a person want to stay with the company. Is introducing that experience that when they go home for the holidays, they share that experience with their family. So think about that. Think about what kind of experience do you want to share with your developers that gets them thinking about long-term their relationship with the company and, of course, their own growth.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions? We have about 3 minutes left.
Question. I know you mentioned affecting places like Gaza. So do you see in the near future doing like a hackathon in Jamaica or Ethiopia or Haiti or the Philippines?
So my heritage is Haitian, Haitian Afro-Latino, and so I would love for one day to be able to go to Haiti and have a hackathon, to go to Jamaica, and to those places, but also to go to, so I went to school in England, and to go to the Hackney area in London, Cowley Road right outside of Oxford. So there's some places in Paris where not only are these young people marginalized, but educators aren't really thinking about, they don't even have a really strong, robust technology community, but educators aren't really thinking about coding, aren't really thinking about STEM. And so I think that that's also an opportunity, is to reach those kids. So throughout, not just the African diaspora, but Latin America, Africa, I want to go everywhere.
That's great. So my final question is, where do I sign up?
Sure, so you go to mbkhack.com, you can go to Qeyno.com, and it connects you to our hackathons and our hackathon schedule. And you can also go to Ms. Kelly Nayo over here, who's my Chief of Operations. Without her, none of this would be possible. I think she even got me here on time. And so just talk to her, and she would be able to, because if you give me a business card, I'd say, yeah, we'll be gone. So just talk to her, and just sign up. mbkhack.com, once again, for Philly, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and ubuntuhack.com for Berkson, Missouri, and once again, Oakland, Berkeley, I think we're planning on Detroit, New Orleans, and several others next year.
Fantastic, thank you. And so before I let you all go, I'm going to ask for the commitment for everyone here who's watching right now to